Hello everyone, this is Terry with Futures.io, and as always, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome back Brett Barrett from NinjaTrader for today's webinar, Track Volume Profile and More with NinjaTrader's Order Flow Tool Suite. Throughout the webinar, if you have a question, please feel free to type into the questions box. We'll do our best to answer them throughout the event. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the Futures.io website within 24 to 48 hours. If you're watching this afterwards on YouTube, please do us a favor and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed our webinar. And as always, please feel free to share, comment, subscribe to our channel. It really helps us a lot. For trading news, events, and information, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter using @Futures.io. And now, without further delay, I'll hand it over to Brett, and you'll get the pop-up to share your screen.
Okay, should be sharing right about now.
Yep, looks good. She's all yours.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for inviting me back into the Futures.io webinar room. It's always a pleasure to be here. My name is Brett Barrett. I'm one of the product managers here at NinjaTrader. And today's webinar is going to be an overview of our Order Flow Plus toolset. There's a lot of functionality in these tools, a lot of ways you can set it up, a lot of parameters and settings, all which can be comboed in interesting and unique ways and are actually a lot of fun to play with. And that's kind of what we're going to do today. Today, I'm going to go through just a kind of some basic overview of Order Flow Plus, kind of what it is at a base level, and then start kind of getting into what you can actually do with it. I'll start kind of simple and then kind of work my way up through some advanced setups and just kind of explain things as I go. So for those of you that might have been using NinjaTrader Order Flow Plus for a while, hopefully you might get something out of this webinar based on some new setup you hadn't yet considered. And for those of you that maybe are new to NinjaTrader or do not have a lifetime license with Order Flow Plus yet, and just kind of interested to see what you can do with it, I hope you'll get something out of this webinar as well. Before I get into it, I do have to get through some disclaimers here. So let me just read through these really briefly and then we'll get started right away. The risk of loss in trading can be substantial regardless whether it is in securities, futures, contracts, or foreign exchange. You should therefore carefully consider whether such trading is suitable for you in light of your circumstances and financial resources. You may sustain a total loss of the funds that you deposit with your broker to establish or maintain a position in the commodity, futures, and foreign exchange markets. And you may incur losses beyond these amounts. You can learn more about these risks by inquiring with your broker directly. And finally, this presentation is brought to you by NinjaTrader LLC, a software development company which owns and supports the NinjaTrader platform. NinjaTrader LLC is an affiliated company in NinjaTrader Brokerage. This presentation is for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell any security, future, or foreign exchange contract. Any questions that are not related to the NinjaTrader trading platform should be sent to your brokerage firm directly. Alrighty, so let's get into some basics here and we'll quickly get into it. So what is Order Flow Plus? Order Flow Plus, for those of you that might be new to NinjaTrader, it is part of the unlocked as part of the NinjaTrader lifetime license. It's a module that's we consider to be a premium module, part of the lifetime license. What it includes is a set of indicators and bars. Volumetric bars, volume profile are the most used out of that tool set. The rest of them are kind of are I wouldn't say secondary, but an addendum to those, which is the VWAP, market depth map, trade detector, and cumulative delta. I won't spend too much time on the remaining four, but what I will spend the most time on is a volume profile and our volumetric bars. So what's significant about order flow? Why do I need it? What's the point? And really, what is it? Order flow takes our traditional charting methods, time and price-based relationship, and instead inverts it and focuses on trades and volume. Less of a focus is time, though you can integrate that with your analysis. And in fact, I'll show you various unique ways to do that. But the volume comes first. And so with order flow, it allows us to get a complete and well-rounded picture of the market participants and the auction process that's ongoing. Usually these order flow tools are it's a valuable confirmatory analysis tool, meaning I don't see too many traders using it as their sole approach or way to generate a signal of which you would decide to go long or short, but rather a way to confirm or help you enter into the market in combination with another signal that you might be running off of, depending on how you're trading the market. So, and I'll show you a little bit of what I mean by that here shortly. Lastly, understanding the balance and imbalance using volumetric bars. This is an auction process, and there's a way for us to kind of peek into that auction process and decide whether or not we have balance or we have imbalance, and what that means and how to identify that. I'll talk briefly about that when I get into volumetric bars. And then finally, really all this is about is ultimately the identification of possible support and resistance levels. So where is the market kind of holding up at a specific price point? How much volume is here? How many people are, how much fear or greed is going to come in here based on how many people have executed at this price? You know, it's just ways to identify specific pricing areas that might be possible support and resistance levels, and help us decide when to enter, you know, when to or where to place a stop and a target, for example. And so we'll show a little bit about that as well. And I want to just talk a little bit about what really is a trade. There's a simple and easy answer to it, but it actually takes some time to really think about it and really understand it. And then based on that understanding, can you then extrapolate these order flow tools on top of it? And so what really is a trade? So, I mean, the easy answer is when a buyer and a seller come together to agree to either buy or sell a specific security, right? Well, that's the fundamental answer, but what's the technical answer? What's really going on? And when we look at the markets, and I like to use a Superdome to kind of talk a little bit about this, so I'm going to come out of the slides here and drop into the platform. And I've got a Superdome here in the middle here, which is just a ladder of price and a way for me to place some orders here and just kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here. But what really technically is a trade? And if I have an order to buy on the down here at 31,1650, and then I put up here at 20 even, and I have two orders here just sitting in the market, and we would see that in our level 2 feed, right? That's what we get to see in the Superdome. All these numbers are the amount of orders resting at that price. Well, if I've got a buyer and a seller here, and they're just sitting there with, you know, I'm not going to go higher than this price, and I'm not going to sell lower than this price, well, nothing's going to happen. No trade will happen in this scenario, because this seller does not want to come down to the offer price, and vice versa. So for a trade to happen, there has to be an aggressor, and an aggressor is somebody that makes the trade-off that says, I'm willing to meet your price. So somebody's already waiting in the market, so orders sitting here at this price, and somebody will come up and say, I will pay that price. And when the person that does that, whether it's the buyer or the seller, that is called the aggressor. So in this case, if I wanted to, and how that technically works is, if you think about it from an order type perspective, there's limit orders, stop orders, and market orders. That's what we have to work with. And the way that an aggressor almost in all cases will be either a market order or a limit order with a limit price greater than or equal to the current bid or ask. So another term for those are called marketable limit orders. I've heard them called that from time to time. Just an order that will basically instantly execute because the limit price is either less than or greater than the current bid or ask. So those are the only two ways of which a trade happens. So when we think about that, that means that when a trade happens, the person that's making the trade is the one that's made the trade-off as to, I need this done now. I'm giving in, right? I don't think what I have is good, right? Or I need to take profit here, or whatever the reason may be, but the aggressor is the one that's actually, let's say, causing the trade to happen. So now that we know technically what we're working with here, we have additionally data that we have to work with. So whenever we're connected to our data feed provider, it doesn't matter who you use in this case, when you connect up, you get what's called level 1 data. And level 1 data, it consists of a stream of bid prices, a stream of ask prices, and a stream of last prices or trades, whatever you want to call it. And when these 3 streams is all we have to work with. We get these 3 streams. So based on this, when a trade comes in on the last stream, there's no data part of that says, oh, this was a buyer, the buyer was the aggressor, or the seller was the aggressor, at least not with NinjaTrader. The way that we do that is we need to classify those trades. We need to figure out who was the aggressor, right? And to do that, there's a couple of ways to do it, and I'll show you the settings in which you can do that. What we call that is our tick classification mode, and basically there's up, down tick, and bid and ask being the default. And what that means is that as we're watching, NinjaTrader will watch that stream of ask events, watch that stream of bid events coming in, so we know what the current ask or bid price is. And then as that last trade comes in, did it occur on the current ask price, or did it occur on the current bid price? And based on that, if it occurred on the ask, then we know that the buyer was the aggressor. If it occurred on the offer, or I'm sorry, the bid price, then we know the seller was the aggressor. And that's how we do our classification. And that's the default setting. You need to make sure that you have good bid ask data for this to work. And there is an alternative mode, which is since only certain providers has this stream of data, everyone's got it in real time, but not everyone has it in historical. And a lot of these tools, you want to actually look at what happened in historical. And so if your provider does not have that historical access, then you can switch to up and down tick mode, which just says if a tick occurs and it ticks up, that's how, or if the last tick was lower than the previous tick, then we're making an assumption that it's either the buyer was the aggressor or the seller was the aggressor in that case, based on whether it's ticking up or ticking down. It's not as accurate as the bid and ask mode, but it gets pretty close. Both modes are pretty comparable. So you do have the option of which to use. I basically will always use the bid ask mode if it's available, basically. And what we do with that data is, especially in our volumetric bars. So I've got a chart, a Superdome, I've got a depth map over here, which I'll explain here in just a minute. But all I'm talking about in this auction process, which I've just switched tabs here, and I went to a volumetric chart. And what this is this gives us an insight into that auction process and what I was talking about, what's happening with the aggressor. If we were to zoom in here, and just take a look at, so I've got 2 bars on this chart, right? And let's take a look at the one on the left, this green bar here. What the volumetric bars are showing us here, and I'm gonna just kind of quickly go over this since I wanna get into some more advanced setups here shortly, and just make sure I have a little bit to offer for beginners getting in here, and also those that might have been using this, or might already be using these concepts, which is, it just gives us an insight into the how many people executed on the bid versus how many executed on the ask per price level. So here we can see we got 106 versus 291, 428 versus 291 up here, and we shade those based on the delta. So how badly did the bears be the aggressor? How much was the bulls the aggressor? We classify this and color it, and that's what you see in the background in the color. Is so if we see a lot of green here, so here in the middle of the chart, we got a lot of green here, this was very bullish. So there's a lot of trades where buyers are coming in, they're being the aggressor because they're hitting the ask price on offer. They're saying, give me that ask price, I'll pay it. That is then classified as a bullish, and vice versa. So this gives us an insight into this, and I'm going to swing back around to this after I get over into volume profile. But this is the auction process, and this is what what's happening in the majority of the order flow tools is we have some aspect of this going on where we're taking the auction process, chopping it up and displaying it in various ways so that you can get some data that's more than just time and price, since we actually have this data to work with. And it's just, as a trader, it's always a good idea to be well educated as to what's going on and looking at all the data you have available. And when you look at a chart, everybody's got chart bars. Here's what happened in 1 minute, and it's got an open, high, low, close, and a volume. Everybody's got that data to work with, and it extrapolates off that data. I'll call that base data. Every indicator that's ever written that works off of bars, simple moving averages, anything, any technical analysis approach, ADX, whatever, it's all extrapolated from bars, right? That open, high, low, close, volume. And you have that data to work with and extrapolate something from it. Well, Order Flow Plus gives you something more. With the combination of those bid, ask, and last data streams, we can actually provide you some more base data of which to make some decisions and analyze and figure out certain ways to look at into it. But I consider it to be a base, a base way of looking at the market. The data is there. It's not something that's extrapolated from bar data. It's unique, it's new, it's there. So that's why I feel it's important. And there's various ways to look at it. The one that I typically use the most and actually did most of the kind of design work on is the volume profile tool. The volume profile tool, I've got a couple things on here. Let me simplify. I've got a VWAP. This is a VWAP. I love the VWAP indicator. It's actually pretty cool. But I've got a couple. I've got two indicators on here. I'm going to right click and go to indicators. And I've got two profiles here. And how I've set this up is I've got a profile which is running on a monthly profile and on a weekly profile. So the weekly profiles, and I've got a couple different modes here. I've got this done up in heat mode here, where it just basically colors areas that have more volume darker, basically. And it's just a cool way to look at it. And on the right side here, this is called a composite volume indicator, or volume profile, which is just overlaid over the top and in the margin here on the right side. And as I scroll around, you'll see that these are attached to the bars, whereas this composite one just stays over here on the right side. So there are a ton of properties and settings on this volume profile. Volume profile just shows us the volume. You pick the time window, and we'll start adding the volume that occurred at that price, no matter when it happened. And what you'll see here is we've got the point of control, which is simply the highest volume and highest price. At the most volume trading at a single price is the point of control. It's just the highest one, whatever that is. So you can see here, we got here, if I zoom in a little bit here, you can see this is the highest volume. Hence, it's got this orange line and a price, and that is our point of control. On the outside of this, we've got two blue lines by default, and that's our value area high, value area low. It's basically, if you know math, it's standard deviation type approach where, simply spoken, just the range of which, and you can customize this. If I go to indicators and value area percentage, it's where 68% of the volume occurred. So the range where, just a simple way of saying the range where the majority of the volume occurred. And that could be a potential support and resistance level. We've got our value area high, value area low, plus many other ways to look at this data and combine volume profiles in unique ways. And really all you're doing is you're looking to just pick out areas where you might find some resistance, some support. There's tons of ways of looking at this data, like the significance of, a bell shape here where devoid of volume, that can be significant. Excessive volume can be significant. The range of the volume can be significant. There are all these ways that you can look at this data, but I call it base data. It's nothing extrapolated from bars. It's what you have to look at and can form a trading strategy from on volume profile. And with volume profile, it loads this data. Basically, we have to have finer access to data. Volume profiles can be pretty heavy. So you want to be picky and choosy where you choose to use them, because they do need to load. If you want to load, right now I've got these loading minute data in the background, which has a granularity of 1 minute bars of which to load that data. It's not 100% accurate, but it does get us very, very close within a 1 minute granularity, and it loads way faster. And so if I double click on this guy, order flow volume profile, we got the resolution property here. You can either load that with minute data or tick data. Tick data taking the longest. We got to load every single trade basically, and then do the analysis on what price level it did, trade it at, and then assign that to a level. So minute loads much faster. Tick is more granular, loads slower, takes more memory. So there's trade-offs to what you choose to use. You might want to have a higher granularity on one chart, but maybe on your longer term charts, things like anything that's typically you'll want to run minute on anything that's got like 20 days back or 365 days back, and you're looking at longer term profiles. You're going to want to run minute data for that, since tick data is just so heavy to run with that. Just a lot of data there. So before I start digging into, so we got volume profile and we got volumetric bars. We've described a little bit about them. We've described the basics. We've described what order flow is, what we're looking at. Let's dive into some setups and kind of what you can do with NinjaTrader, and how you can configure it to see what you'd like to see. And before I get into that, we're going to take a quick look at the questions here. I'm going to take a quick pause. And we got a couple of questions here. I'm just going to pick a few. So we got one here. It says, does volume profile show initial balance and singles? Yes, we can do initial balance. I'll show you that here in just a minute. So initial balance is just a quick and easy way to say where was our profile, or where was the volume value area in the first X minutes of the session, right? And if you go to the indicator setup, go to order flow here, we should have initial balance time here, and it says in minutes. And if I have 0 here, that's basically off. But if I want to go ahead and plug in, what was the initial balance within the first 5 minutes of the day, for example, you can turn that on. That'll recalculate, and I'll show you a gray line here to show you where that initial balance area was. Can be good for like gap stuff and things like that. So yeah, we do have that feature. Is it possible to display a volume profile for the overnight session separate from one for the day session? So yeah, that's actually one of the common setups I do, and I'll be showing that off here momentarily. Great question. How can we get that information? Oh, let me click on the question here. Looks like it was tied in with another question. Let me read this one. Hi, the previous chart that shows on the right side, numbers, green, red boxes, is that part of NTA? Yes, it is. So everything I'm showing you here today is part of NinjaTrader 8 and the Order Flow Plus package. Okay, and then let's see. What is the volume metric bars indicator called in the indicator list? So it's actually a bar type. So if you're going to add so let's say I want to add a new chart. So I would go create a new chart. I'll just walk you through it. New chart. Select your instrument. Then if you're going to do like a minute chart or a day chart or a volumetric chart. And this is where you get into the volumetric settings. And there's a lot to configure here. I'll save this for the end, and I'm going to focus on volume profile today, but I'll come back around if we have time. Okay. Why not have the total or max or min delta or cumulative delta? Yeah, so yeah, we have that on cumulative delta, and we have it in a few ways actually. We have it on the volumetric bars, and we have it on the cumulative delta. Volumetric bars, there's a summary panel you can turn on the bars themselves. So if you go into the indicator properties for that, come down to show bar statistics, turn those on. You can then have a min delta and a max delta. We can also have the delta percentage bars, etc. You can turn that on. That puts a panel on the bottom where you can graph and show the min and max delta for that entire bar. Also, you can see it in the cumulative order flow or the cumulative depth. What is it? Order flow plus cumulative delta, right? So this actually will display in a bar type format so that you can see the min and max and the change of delta over time. So this gets you the total picture of what happened for that bar. Volumetric bars let you look inside to see what, with more granularity per price level, what happened. So if you were to look at the delta that just happened on this bar, so and delta being, we're kind of getting into that, but just to keep others following along, delta means change. So change, and specifically we're using it in this term, difference, and we're using it in this phrase, in this application to show what's the difference between the aggressive buyers and the aggressive sellers. How many are buying versus how many are selling? And if you take the buying number, aggressive buyers, and the aggressive sellers, and take that difference, that you're left with one number, the delta. And the delta can be negative or positive. Negative if more aggressive selling, and positive if more aggressive buying. And so you can see in this chart, in this big green bar here, we've got a large green positive delta since we've gone up from a negative 2,000 delta to about an 8,000 delta on this one bar. But then on the volumetric bar, we can actually peek into it and we can say, okay, so in this range here, we actually had a negative delta, and then about towards the top, we had mostly positive delta. So it's just kind of what do you want to look at? Okay, great question. Can you show us the property settings of the FP chart? Yeah, sure. So on the left side here, and I actually wanted to bring this up because this gets into our order flow depth map. This is basically what you're seeing on this left-hand side. If I scroll back or in here, what we're looking at is just the size. All it's taken is looking at the level 2 data and how much orders are resting at each price level, and basically plotting that on the dome, or plotting that on the chart, I should say. So if there is a change over time, so this is a 1 second chart, and every second it's going to give us a snapshot and keep that historical data moving. So we can see if a large order comes in, so right around this price point, around this time, there was a larger size order or larger resting order size at this price level, which since left since here. So you can see that there's not much order action going on here. There's a lot down here and a lot up here. But how I set mine up is when you add it to the chart, it only starts in real time moving forward. And what I like to do is I like to combo this. So when I go into the indicator settings, which is what you asked to look at to begin with, I've got this set, mostly all default settings, basically. Yeah, basically all default settings right now. But what I do is I use a chart feature. So I right-click on the chart. Double-click on the bars to go to the data series. Scroll down, And we have a setting. It's not related to Order Flow Plus, but it helps. And what I turn on is, looking for the setting. Here we go. Center price on scale. So on the visual side here. So what I'll do, so if you turn that off, hit apply, okay. So if you were to just have a chart just like this, you just have a really narrow view of the chart where you can try to crunch as many bars as you can on there. But then when you drag in the price area here and kind of collapse that up, now you can see all the levels on your chart on this 1 second chart. Now I'm in fixed mode. So in fixed mode, the chart won't track up and down automatically. So what'll happen is, it'll start trading, for example. Let's move this up. Let's say that the market starts moving down. It will start to run out of room, basically. It'll run off your chart. Let's say if this chart was trading up, there'll be a time where it keeps trading up, and then it actually will be removed off the chart up here. And so by turning on this bar feature, which is center price on scale, every bar update, it'll make sure that the price stays centered, even though I'm in a fixed scaling mode. So I can scale this to what I want to see, just like this, for example, and it will stay. And that way I can set up my order flow depth map right to the left of my dome, and it will stay static. So I almost always do that in that case. So a little hint there. So great question that allowed me to get into that. Appreciate that. Okay, just going to do a little bit of cleanup here on the questions since we did get through a few, and we'll get started again. Okay. All right, so volume profile, a lot of settings here. Typically, you can go in and start reading the help guide. We actually got a pretty good help guide on this stuff. You can press F1 basically, and it'll take you to the help guide here. And we've got a lot of information here. If you're on a chart, you can go down to Order Flow Plus, Order Flow Volume Profile, and we've got a lot of stuff that you can look into there. Really, you learn the most by just playing with it, honestly. And so what I'm going to do, I don't have too much of a schedule to get through on this webinar from here on out. So I'm basically just going to set up a few complex and setups for the volume profile, and just kind of have you follow along with me so that I can kind of show you what it does and how you can set up some of these. So on volume profile, I like to run with a couple volume profiles, and so we have a couple of concepts with volume profile. The primary settings that change the most of the stuff is going to be here, where it's going to be profile type, display mode, your profile period, and really that's the majority of the combinations of settings you can use. And also in combination with that, if I open up a new chart, I also don't want to forget about this. You have, if I go to a minute chart here, we also have the order flow volume profile drawing tool. So if I want to draw out and just look at a specific range of volume profile, I can do that as well. So we got various modes to volume profile. And what we're looking at here on the orange volume profile, we've got it set to profile type of volume. You got three modes here, tick and price. Ticks being just, instead of counting up the volume of each trade, just take the volume away from it and just tell me how many trades actually occurred. So that's what tick will do. It just removes volume from it. So it's just, what's the velocity? It's really what you're looking at there. And then finally price. That is a way, it's basically, I'll get into that here in a minute, but It's just another way of looking at it. Then we've got various display modes where we've got standard, buy sell, delta, heat, outline, and time color. And in here, I've got it set to heat mode, which gives me this kind of color display where it kind of focuses me in on the I'll call them nodes, where we see the most volume occurring. And we've got buy and sell, which that does the bid and ask analysis that I was talking about earlier. So if I turn that on, that actually does require resolution. Where are you at? Tick resolution. Which I'm downloading tick data right now, which is probably a big chart. So right now I'm actually downloading tick data. Let's see how many days of data I have. So 200 days of tick data. That's going to take a little while. So I'll let that calculate as I explain here. So we got volume profile, buy sell mode. We've got standard, which is just a blue graph, which is this guy here. We've got outline, which is just an outline visual way, and time color, which is actually another way of looking at it. Volume profile, you can also do the price-based charts. That's what this is, and it does the letters and things like that. So like if trades occurred during a specific 30-minute window, do this letter kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. I don't personally use that stuff. I just use most of the stuff. So, and then going down here, delta type, that's that bid ask and up down tick I was talking about. So that's how we categorize whether or not a trade occurred on the bid, or whether or not we had a aggressive seller or aggressive buyer. So we're either doing that classification as the bid ask or the up down tick mode. I typically stay on the bid ask mode. Then finally, the profile period. This is really the last major area where I will run a couple of these. I'll run a bar. Sometimes depends on what I'm setting up. You can set up short range charts where maybe you're working within an intraday chart and setting up various volume profiles in an intraday chart. And then you can also set up session or kind of longer term volume profiles, useful in analysis in both methods. When you have a session-based profile, that's just every single session gets one profile. Pretty simple. Let's do this. Let's go standard. So here we go. We have each profile here just gets each session. So I'm on a 60-minute chart here. So pretty long. So we have, roughly, I don't know what, 400 or so, 500 or so bars on here, or no, less than that. But so far, every session here would just have its own volume profile. You can set it up so that each bar has its own volume profile. This will actually fit the volume profile in between the bars. And so since I'm on a 60-minute bar, I now have a profile for every single bar. It's pretty interesting what you can do with this. You can do it on the 60-minute time frames, but you can also get in more granular and go in with some shorter time frame bar. Things like, looking at the 10-minute bars and having a volume profile on that. So you can see a point of control within a single 5 or 10-minute window and kind of add those up to see how many you're looking at in a specific range. Is a useful tool. And then finally, composite, that's what we see on this right side here, actually. Composite simply means, as I select it, I can choose what range I want to, so composite meaning I want to compose or bring a bunch of volume profiles together into one large profile. And how I'm doing that is I either do that weeks back, so I either do this is a 1 week composite indicator, so that means take every single session profile, composite that all into one big profile, and then put it on the right side of my chart. We could do that for days back, months back, so you can do monthly profiles. start date, you can specify a specific date. So if you want to have profiles that might align with other traders, let's say you have a couple of buddies and you want to make sure that your profiles are showing the same thing, you can specify a start date. The chart, so the entire chart, so however much data you're loading in the chart, just do it all. And then visible screen range. Visible screen range is kind of cool. If I go ahead and pull that up. So visible screen range, what that does is as I move the chart around, it takes the start point of the chart, the end point of the chart, and puts that all into one profile that kind of moves as I drag the chart. So that's pretty cool. You know, that mode gets a little bit mixed in with, because if you want to do some, like, you want to zoom in somewhere, you know, you can do it that way. You can come in, zoom in, you know, line it up. You know, I want to see what happened during this down move here, you know, so I could come in here, drag this around, kind of get it set up like that. Okay, I zoomed in. Now I've got my profile for what happened here. Here's my point of control, all fell apart once it broke past, you know, that kind of stuff. Or I can go into that same area there, and I'll go ahead and remove this profile just to get it out of the way. Or you could take your drawing tool. That's where the drawing tool comes in. So now you come in with that profile. You want to say, you know, I want to see what happened during this kind of move up and towards the top here. Drag your start and your end, click and click, and then I get my profile. So 2 ways of achieving the same thing. So on volume profile, what I'll typically do is when I want to set up this chart, so I'm going to go to a blank chart here. I will go ahead and add in, so I'm going to set up a long-term chart here. I'm going to add in a order flow volume profile. And what I'll typically do is I'll go through and set what I'm looking for here. So I'm doing volume profile. I'm going to do a heat profile like I showed you last time. And I'm going to do that. Let's take a look. Let's do a weekly profile. All right, let's do weeks. Sounds good to me. 1 week at a time. I'm going to load it with minute data, and I'm going to click apply. So this gets me my weekly profile. Every single one of these is going to be 1 week of data, right? And I can scroll back, see what my history was, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what I'll typically do is add another order flow volume profile tool. So I'll come in, add another one. Okay. I'll go in here, go to volume. We'll make it a, we could do a heat or a standard, doesn't matter, but let's just do standard for now, just so you can see what that looks like. And then I'll add a composite indicator. So I want it to compose multiple profiles into one. And I'm going to do that for, let's say, months back. And I'm going to make this a monthly profile with 1 month back. Minute resolution is fine. And now what I'll do is in the visual side here, if I just click apply with those settings, you'll notice that the profile will actually be on the left side of the chart. I prefer mine on the right, so I'll go down to the visual settings, go from left profile alignment to right, click apply. That puts it on the right side of the chart, but you'll notice that it's overlaid. Now you might like that. In fact, it works pretty well if you come in here and switch it from the display mode from standard to just outline. Here, you'll get just the outline, which doesn't clutter it up too bad. It's not a bunch of stuff going on, but you can either work it like that, or you can come in, select display in margin, click apply. That will apply some margin so that it just kind of puts a channel on the right hand side of the chart. This way it's not overlapped over your bars. So that's what I prefer to do. And so So on this setup here, I've got a reoccurring overlapped weekly profile with a composite monthly profile for the entire month, which the month's only we're only 5 days into the month, so there's not much going on in that, but that's the idea. Okay, next thing you can do, and we're going to take another step into complexity here on the volume profile, and this is one of the questions that I actually read briefly when we took a break and answered a few questions, which is, can we do an RTH and an ETH volume profile? And the answer is yes. So let's clear these off. And what we're going to do is go into our right click, go into indicators, do another order flow volume profile. And when you come into sessions here, you'll see I've got a trading hours parameter here where you select a trading hour template. The chart already has a trading hour template, so you need to pick whichever one you're looking for. So in this case, if you don't know which one the trading hour template you're on, if I go to ES, if I go to Tools, Instrument, go to ES, and then I look down here, trading hours templates. This is CME US Index Futures ETH. So this is the default template for this instrument, which if I double click on my bars and I said use instrument settings, that's the default template that is in use. So I've got an ETH chart here. So let's say I want to have an RTH volume profile on it. So what I'll do is go to indicators, go to order flow volume profile again, and then I'll go down to trading hours and I'll select CME US Index Futures RTH. So now I will have a volume profile which just consists of the RTH hours. And if I go to my indicators here, I'm actually going to make it, instead of it doing it every single session, which is going to be a lot of little profiles here on 60-minute bars, we're going to do it every week. Click OK. So now we're looking at a weekly RTH profile. And so you can actually set up both profiles on the ETH and the RTH side and view them separately as well. So that should answer one of the questions we had in the chat. So by selecting your trading hours templates, you can choose what you're choosing to put in the, what you're choosing to include in your volume profile calculations. Okay, let me see something here. All right, so let's take a quick break here on volume profile and let's run through any more questions we have. Let's see, how much time does this type of indicator add to your time flow of data? I'm already concerned with latency, keeps me up at night, LOL. So I think practice time, I'm not sure, maybe there's a spelling error there that's making it's hard for me to understand, but if you're talking about how heavy the indicators are to calculate, on real-time stuff, so it really depends on what settings you apply. Typically on volume profile stuff, it just depends on what settings you use. So if you load it with a resolution of minute, for example, it's not that much memory, and it calculates pretty fast. If you load it up with tick data and you make sure you have, maybe you just load 5 days in your chart and you're going to use tick data on your volume profiles, then yes, it only loads 5 days of data. It will still calculate pretty fast, but in memory, you're holding 5 days of tick data. So there's a little bit of memory, more memory pressure or memory requirements you have just based on the amount of data being there. In runtime, it's actually the same. It doesn't matter. So there's a difference between kind of memory requirements and CPU requirements and graphics cards requirements to draw, and all of that comes into play. Typically, most modern computers these days are able to run any of these volume profile tools. I mean, I'm on just kind of a normal laptop here and able to run pretty quick. So just as long as you don't get too crazy with a lot of stuff going on, 50 volume profiles, that kind of stuff, and you picky and choosy on where you want to have that extra granularity in your chart, yeah, should be no problem. So if that wasn't the question, let me know, but I think that was it. The previous chart that's shown to the right side, is that part of NT8 with green, red? Okay, I read that question before. Yep, that's the volumetric bars. Let's see, is it possible to display a volume profile for the overnight session separate from the one from the day session? Yes, it is. We talked about that. Does volume profile show initial balance? Yeah, we got that question already. Where do we find the volumetric bars? Yep, got that one already. Can we combine heat volume profile with volumetric bars? You definitely can, but there's a lot of shading and stuff going on. So it ends up being too much on the chart, I feel. So yes, you technically can combine them. Practically, does it make sense? Not really. Does NinjaTrader provide templates to download for different chart profile setups? We don't at this time. Can you place your bars in a point and figure and show volume? Point and figure bars and show volume? Yeah. So that's simply switching to point and figure, and we'll do it through the bars. Point and figure. Minute chart, click apply, click OK. And so now we've got a point and figure chart with a profile applied. When can we expect the recording? Missed a lot. Recordings on Futures.io, I believe, are typically within 24 to 48 hours. You should see it posted. Did you say this package is available for lifetime license without additional fees? That's correct. So it's part of the lifetime license. Let's see. We actually got quite a few questions. Let's see. I can't seem to get the TPO chart set up as the market profile the way I see other traditional TPO charts, the one with the letters. Okay. So the letters, let me work you through one of those setups. So let's do that on a 60-minute chart fresh. So that one requires some tweaking because letters take up space, and you are stuffing a lot of data into a chart. So you got to size the parameters correctly based on what you're doing. So if I go into indicators, order flow plus, volume profile, that's what I'm looking for. So we have set to price mode here. And what I'll do is I'll just click apply here. And let's set this to, it's every session. Let's do week. Let's get a larger one here. Our session's fine. Let's do that. Our set week. All right. So now we've got a price profile. And so what this is doing is it's basically coloring it based when the price trades at a specific time, it will get a color, and that color is defined in the properties. So if I right click down here, go down to times, every single time range has a letter and a color. So if I look here, if it trades anytime between 7 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., I'll see blue on my profile. And if you're going to use these profiles, you got to memorize the letters to what time they go, reference back to this, or you reference the color. And we've kind of combined a bunch of colors up together, but you can kind of see what happened. So now on our single profile here, we've got a set of colors here. And the reason why we're seeing colors and not letters is because if we were to draw letters in these small little blocks here, you would not be able, there's no chance you could read that letter, let alone, in any sane way. So what you end up having to do on charts where we have instruments that have long ranges, so this is quite a long range. So where the high, there's a lot of ticks in between this price and this price. So what you need to do is come in here to your profile, go to our settings, and we're looking for ticks per level, this guy right here. So what that means is that for every level in the profile, how many ticks belong to that level. So with 1, that means every single tick gets its own level in the profile. On these bigger guys where they got such long ranges, you need to come in and bump this up. So let's try something even like 12. So now every 12 ticks or 4 points will have a single row. And as I do that, now that I have a little bit more space for the letters to actually print, I can now see I get that traditional profile that you're looking for with the letters, and you can use the profile in that way. Great question. So it's just kind of working depending on what your instrument range is, how small the letters would actually be. You need to kind of work with that ticks per level to massage it, you know, kind of play around with it, increase it by around 2 to 4 every so often, just hit apply until you dial it in, figure out what you need. And so great question. Do we need a purchase order flow plus separately? That it's part of the lifetime license. Does the amount of depth levels on the book we have depending on the data provider? So yes, so the amount of market depth you have is completely dependent on the provider. We don't limit it in any way. So if your provider sends 100 rows of depth, you'll get 100 rows. If they just send 10, you'll only get 10. Next question, do you use the default VWAP settings or do you change them? Actually, it depends. We actually added some cool new VWAP stuff, and I actually really like the VWAP indicator. It's one of my favorite. For some reason, it just kind of, the standard deviation lines of a VWAP just, for whatever reason, just appear to match up well with support and resistance levels, in my opinion. But if we go to VWAP here, VWAP stands for volume weighted average price. If you use all default settings and click apply, it's going to end up looking like this. This one here is a per session VWAP. So every single session, the VWAP starts over. That's important for VWAP because when you're doing just the way that the math works on VWAP, you know, volume weighted average price, that means you're taking the average price and each price gets a weighting based on how much volume occurred at that price. So if a lot of volume occurred at one price, it's going to be weighted heavier and hence will affect the average price more than others. VWAP's great since it allows you to kind of see where the kind of true average of where all the trades took place based on volume, which is the center line in here. But then what we do is we take, kind of using standard deviation math, we'll kind of extrapolate that out and provide, you know, you can pick, I think it's up to 3, and then you can kind of remove some if you'd like, change colors, whatever. But if you double click on this, those are standard deviation bands, so you can turn those off if you just want the simple VWAP line at all, or you can turn them on. But what I was talking about is, with the whole trick to VWAP is just when do you reset it? So when you're averaging stuff, the more points you average, the harder it is for any single new data point to kind of materially move the average. You need to have something major happen over a long time to get something that's already been averaged for a while. So the average on VWAPs at the beginning of the day, whenever we restart it on each session, it will move around a lot more than towards the end of the day, where that VWAP is pretty well set in stone because all the volume occurred previously in the day. So where you reset your VWAP is the trick, and we have new settings. I believe we released this in R19. I can't remember 100%, but you can decide when to reset. So you could do that every session, every week, or every month. So if you want a weekly VWAP, for example, you can come in here and you can kind of see this week's VWAP, and you'll see that VWAP, it can move really far, and then it's kind of stabilized out. We're kind of getting towards the end of the week, so, and then you can kind of see how the standard deviation, you can kind of see how that went up here to that high, kind of bounced off of it. It's kind of floating around this kind of average price, this kind of the mean of the day. So, it's very cool. So that's VWAP. So I went in a little more detail on VWAP, so I appreciate you asking that question. What data sources your software work with? Are you going to continue to accept data from TD Ameritrade? So no changes to what's available. We do offer data from TD Ameritrade. All of the data sources are listed on our website. If you need some help finding that or want some just first-hand information, you can also contact platform support at ninjatrader.com. They can help get you some information. I got a question, what is the trade detector? I'll leave that. I'll kind of swing back around on that here in just a few minutes. Let's see. Okay, so still too many questions to get through. So we're going to have to kind of pause there, and I'll kind of move on a little bit more. But great questions, guys. All right, so volumetric bar. So we talked a little bit about volume profile and the various modes, how you can combo certain profiles together with others. The fact that you can draw them out, you can pick when you want to slice and dice, you can do bid-ask analysis on a profile, you can load it with minute or tick resolution to get the highest granularity. Now let's get into volumetric bars. And then finally, I'll go into trade detector, which is kind of one of the last aspects of Order Flow Plus. With volumetric bars, I talked a little bit about how this works, and we talked at the beginning of the webinar about what really technically is happening when a trade occurs, and we talked about that aggressor concept and whether or not a buyer or seller is the aggressor, and using the volumetric bars to show who was the aggressor and how aggressive were they. And this works a lot on the delta concept, where we'll say, at any single price point, who was most aggressive? Was it buyers or was it sellers based on volume, and how aggressive they were based on classifying it, whether or not trades occurred on the ask or the bid. And then what we'll do is we apply some colors to just draw your eye out to what was most active or least active based on the current session. So those colors they'll reset every session, and it's just a tool to draw your eye onto the delta. And you can view volumetric bars in many ways, but one of the ways that I like to do it is we recently added, there's about 5 or 6 main ways you can set up volumetric bars. All of them are, equally important things that you should play around with. One thing that I like to do is I can turn on the show as profile. So what that does is that it shows a bar on the left-hand side of the center area here, and will show who was stronger as well. So it kind of gives an extra profile-like display of the volumetric analysis. Then I like to come in and let's see here, set a couple of other things. I like to make the box outline, which is this box here, I like to set that to transparent. Click apply. So take the box on the outside away. Then I like to, I'm looking for the setting to move. Show volume, that's interesting. Where's my setting? Color dominant, color. Move the bar, show. Okay, where did my setting go? Show volume, show. Oh, there it is. It's right in front of me. Center open close bar. So what I'll do is check mark that. click apply. Now that throws that bar kind of in the middle. So now we're kind of looking at a profile-like bar where I can see the open, close of the bar, and I can also see the high and the low of the bar based on the profile being there. Sometimes I take the letters away, sometimes I don't, but you can do that here by just hide text, turn that on, just kind of cleans it up. You know, if you're, especially if you're looking at these charts and you're looking at a lot at one time, a lot of bars, you know, having text that small just kind of gets in the way because you can kind of just see it and visualize it. So I'll sometimes turn the text off, and then what I'll do is I'll turn off this show point of control here. Show maximum, uncheck that. And then I'm kind of set up with a profile-like display. You can add a volume profile to the right of these as well. It just kind of summarizes all of what happened during that 10-minute and shows you what the highest total volume was. I find that I just kind of, if I put it and use it in this way, I can kind of see it just dynamically. So I'll usually leave it off. And so, you know, you can see that I can drastically change the way the volumetric bars look, and this is just one configuration. Let me show you another one. So let me restore these settings here. Click apply, get me back to default. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to a 10-minute chart. So we have a little bit more data to work with in a single bar. And we're going to come down and we're going to work with imbalance. So then we turn on show imbalance. And when I do that, I get a couple of settings: imbalance ratio, imbalance mode, diagonal and horizontal, and the minimum delta for imbalance. So when I do that, when I turn that on, I'll get text on the volumetric chart here. So I zoom in here. Let me turn off the execution markers here so that those little plot executions do not plot, since I traded on my sim account today. Get that out of the way. So now we've got these purple and cyan colors here. And let's just look at this one here where it says 299. So when we're looking at order flow, and we're classifying this data as occurring on the bid and the ask during this while this 10-minute bar is forming, trades are coming in. We're saying this is a buy, this is a sell, this is a buy, this is a sell. We're adding it to the bar and adding up these numbers as it goes. One way to think about it is that in any point in time where you have a bid and an ask and you have trades going off at a bid and an ask, there's a battleground, right? The bears and bulls are fighting, right? The question is, what do you consider to be the battleground? One way of looking at it is the battleground is between when you have bid and the ask can't be at the same price. So in this case, there's 17 even here is this row, and 17.25 is this row. When trades are going off here, that means the ask is at 17.25 right here, and the bid is over here at 17 even. So when this bid and ask is at the market here and trades are executing at the ask, numbers are counting up here, that means that this number is actually in competition with this number. This is the battleground. It's diagonal, right? Because you can't have bid and ask at the same price. So you can say the battleground was this diagonal battleground here between these two numbers. And we can look at that and we can say 299, that is X times more than 39. And if it happens to be more than that imbalance property you set here, so imbalance ratio 1.5. So if I see 1.5 times the amount of volume on this ask value over this bid value, we can say that this got a ton, there was a lot of buyers coming in here, right? Classified as buyers. And that is at an imbalance at this particular battleground compared to the ask. So it's imbalanced because we've got way too many coming in as buyers, right? not at, and more than 1.5 times the number of sellers that are going on at this one battleground at this one time within this 10-minute window of this bar. Another way to look at it is you could do a horizontal comparison. So with a horizontal comparison, what we're actually saying is, okay, I get that there's a battleground between a bid and an ask at any one specific point, but really I want to look at this from a price perspective, and I want to know I want to look for imbalance between horizontally on this one row just by itself. And now we're doing color shading by comparing them horizontally, the two numbers. So it's actually two separate battlegrounds. You're kind of, two or more battlegrounds, because it depends, remember, this is a 10-minute bar. So it could come down here, tick, 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 trade here, come up here, start trading up at this price. This battleground's been left, it's not active anymore. Whatever numbers we had down here is old news. Then what it could do is come back down within that same 10-minute window and start trading at it again. Well, in that case, we're kind of mixing in two battlegrounds together, right? Two trade events, two things are going on within this 10-minute window and all getting aggregated together. And if you don't want to see that, you'd rather just do it based on horizontal, just do it by price in the whole 10-minute window, then you can switch to that mode. And now it's less of that going on and more of just looking at it from a price perspective and saying, at this price, we had this many buyers going on versus this many sellers. And if buyers is 1.5 or whatever ratio you like, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, mark it as an imbalance and draw my eye to it. And that, that's something that's some potential support and resistance level. And so, and last thing I'll do, and then I'll mention, and this is kind of how I use volume profile in my setups, and even with the order depth map, I'll mention a little bit about this, which is what I'll do. I'm going to go ahead and do another 60-minute chart here. Go ES minute, 60-minute chart, 5 days back. Go ahead and add another volume profile. And we'll just add that as a session profile. Zoom in a little bit here. So ultimately, all of what we're talking about, all these tools are just drawing our eye to specific levels that might have some more importance because more people have traded at that. There's more motion at that level. Things you can find, various trading strategies around these concepts. But now you've got visibility into it and you can play around with it and figure out what works for you in your setup. And what I like to do is I'll use them for entries and exits. For example, I'll typically almost always use an ATM strategy, where I've got my set defined stop loss and profit target. Let's just say I want to go long here. I'll go by market. I'll turn on my chart trader. So I can see my orders on my chart here. And so what I'll do, so now I'm long here, and so I might see this value area here. I might come in here. Let's zoom in a little bit more here. So I might look at here and I can say, okay, we've got value area, we've got kind of a high value area node here with a lot of volume right around this price point. It actually happens to be our value area high. And I could say if it breaks below that, that means it's broken past some support. Maybe it's got more downside in this. Maybe that's where I want my stop to be, right? So I'm kind of fine tuning my stops and my targets to kind of move it into areas that might align better with the order flow. You're just looking for synergies there. And so you can do that on your entries. So where do I want to place my limit order? Basically kind of thinking. And then also do it on your stops and targets, where you're just kind of fine tuning your stops and targets, tuning them in based on data off of your order flow tools. So that's just another way of using the setups. Okay. So today's webinar was mostly about some setting up volume profile, basics of profile, order flow plus tools. I think we covered a lot of the tool sets out there. I don't think we got to everything, but we at least showed a little bit about how I usually will set up a chart with some of the settings of the profile. Now let's take the next, we'll start answering questions for about, I'll say probably the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. We'll see how many questions there are. And then if we run out of time, I'll ask that any questions that didn't get answered, you can reach out to our platform support team, or you can also reach out to me personally at brett.barrett@ninjatrader.com. So if you guys had a question in the room, I'm going to start running through them, and let's see what we got. All right. Just kind of moving the question window around here so I can see it better. Bear with me. Okay. All right. Can the heat mode show buying heat in green and selling pressure in red? Answer is yes. So double click on that profile, get into the settings. I mean, there's so many settings on these things. If you can think of it, you can probably do it. So if you go to heat mode first, so I'm going to go to heat. Down here in the visual side here, you're going to see color for high heat, color for low heat. I've got it red and yellow by default. You can pick any maximum, minimum that you'd like and configure it. Seems like you need a 4K type monitor. It definitely helps, especially with all this data you're trying to show on the screen. There's things you can do to mitigate that. So if you just don't have the screen real estate to do it, and you have to do this on stocks a lot, is you get used to coming in to ticks per level here on the properties. It's always 1 by default. But as you let's say, pump that up to 4, now you're looking at a point in the ES, right? So on the ES, you'll come in, make it a point type system, and that's going to reduce the amount of levels, reduce the amount of kind of data on the screen. Yes, you're getting kind of a average of those 4 tick levels into 1, but you're just able to see more, and it just helps whenever you've got markets that are just ripping higher or lower. There's a lot of ticks going on, especially with the price type charts. So yeah, for sure. Okay. Can you combine heat volume profile with volumetric bars, keep bigger spaces in between? I typically don't recommend that. What I'll recommend doing is, that's what we added the show volume feature for. So if you go into the data series, go to show volume, turn that on. That just throws the volume in between the bars. You can also specify the distance on the width on that, which is down in the visual. But yeah, so that's how we kind of integrate those 2 charts, because it's kind of complex having both of those on at the same time from a management standpoint, and just a lot going on standpoint. So great question. Composite set by calendar weeks, etc. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So we don't just kind of blindly go back and just, whatever your start date of your chart is, count back 7 days, that's a week. These are calendar-based weeks, so we'll make sure that whenever you're setting up a volume profile, you're setting it to composite, or you're setting it to weeks or months, and you're going weeks back, days back, it's going to be calendar weeks, not just kind of arbitrary weeks. That kind of helps everybody's charts stay aligned as well. Great question. Is there any way to make a profile with a start date and end date to make the sectional composite? Absolutely. So we added that feature. Go to volume profile, go to composite, and you're going to go start date and pick a start date here. And then as far as the actual end date, give me a sec here. End date is just the end date of the chart. So let's say I was to pick a specific date here. Then if I really wanted to end it at a specific time, I could just select an end time on the chart. Give me a sec, there's one thing I wanted to check. Composite, range. That's for the composite. Let me go into session, weeks, months, bars. Sessions composite, got it. Okay, so we just have the start date portion of it. So we actually don't have the end date portion. I think we looked into that, and that's maybe why I was a little confused. We definitely looked into adding that feature, but did not make the cut. So we don't have that feature now as far as just making it one sectional component. Now I remember. Sorry. The reasoning why we didn't add that feature where you can specify the start and the end date is because that's really the use case for the drawing tool, right? So if you want a specific profile on a specific start and end date, you just draw it out, right? So there's your specific volume profile tool. Sorry, it took me a little while to get there, but we got there. For instance, yeah, exactly. Can you expand horizontally? Let me see just one or two profiles at a time. Can you expand horizontally? I think it just asked me to show something, but I think we've moved past that, so I'm going to move on. One or two 30-minute profiles, that is. Not sure the question on that one, so I'm going to move in. Did you now watch company provides data? Australia, ASX, BitNest available, download. Use the order flow as you explained. So you're asking who can provide ASX market data. Give us a shout out to platform support at NinjaTrader.com, and we can take a look into that for you. Okay, just awesome, thanks. Feedback. Technically, does the volume profile heat chart show the same information compared to volumetric bars in terms of high volume area? So I'm going to say no, because technically volume profile is just counting up the volume that's occurring at a specific price and adding it up. Volumetric bars are really about showing the delta between the bid and ask at a certain price. So who's winning at that price level, right? That's what the volumetric bars are for. So two fundamentally different ways of looking at the data. One's going to be from and that's why I call it volumetric bars, because you're kind of looking at the delta between buyers and sellers and trying to figure out who's more aggressive. Whereas volume profile is not necessarily picking who's more aggressive, though you can select, you can overlay buyer and sellers in the volume profile, but it's more about just total volume per price, right? So hopefully that answers the question. When will NT8's artificial intelligence strategy builder module be usable with third-party indicators? It's actually available with NinjaTrader release 20. That was one of our top feedback for that. So we call it strategy generator. It's a tool as part of the strategy analyzer, which you just kind of let it run, and it just tests tons of combinations of indicators, parameters, settings, trying to find profitable strategies, and kind of ranks them and returns back with some kind of conditions that the computer found. And it's doing this based on kind of AI. And that's experimental in NinjaTrader 8 right now, and we just released R20 this AM, which is has support for third-party indicators. So glad you asked that. Are you guys going to have the ability to select VWAP parameters? Oh, and actually, I think I misspoke. That feature to have AI generate work, I believe we actually scheduled that to R21 now that I'm thinking about it. So that's going to be coming in the next release. I think we wanted to do a little bit more QA on it before we did release that. So do look for that in R21. So sorry, I misspoke about that. It's not available in R20 yet. You got this select VWAP parameters, 2-day VWAP, 5-day VWAP. So right now we just have the ability to select whether you want to do a weekly, daily, or monthly VWAP. We don't have plans at this time to say, I just want a 2-day VWAP or a 3-day VWAP. I don't have a rolling VWAP. You might need to provide some more details on specifically what you're looking there. I mean, you can roll it either daily, monthly, or weekly, right? You can roll it based on the start and end date of your chart as well, technically. We don't offer that feature since, I mean, it's important to know whenever you're resetting the VWAP, because that's the most critical point of a VWAP. So, you know, just having it start running at any particular old time isn't, it's hard to keep track of, you know, so you got to decide when to roll it. Yes, we could implement a feature, and we did look into this, like a feature like, do you choose when to roll it, basically, to a new VWAP period, but we don't have support for that today. How do I check that I'm running the latest version of NinjaTrader 8? And how can you set it up to auto update? So we don't have an auto update feature in NinjaTrader 8. It just gives maximum flexibility for you to decide when to update. But it's simply in the help menu on the control center, you can go to download and download the latest version. You can also go to help about to see what version of NinjaTrader you're running on. Great question. Looks like we've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 or so questions left, and about 4 minutes till 4 where I have a hard stop. So I'm going to try to select a couple more questions here. Please talk about sensitivity and imbalance. Yeah, let's do that. So imbalance. I'm sorry. I think you're talking about imbalance highlight boldly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sensitivity of the, I believe you're talking volumetric bars. So in volumetric, there's a strength sensitivity property, which is just set to 20. What this means is that there's 20 levels or colors that can be assigned. So in this case, you know, this might be the highest red color that we have, and this might be the highest lime green color that we have. And then between those two extreme maximums, there's 20 rows of colors which can be assigned. And what we'll do is we'll take those 20 gradients, and based on the highest delta seen for the session and the lowest delta seen for the session, those will become the delta max, delta min. And then based on how the delta for each row adds up between that delta min, delta max, it gets assigned a color. And that's how we pick which color to give for each row. So if you want to have just, let's say, you know, and you can play around with this. So you can just, if you want just 4 colors, so just kind of be more binary, you know, with 2, it's either up or down, good or bad delta, you could do that. Or you could set it up to 80, and it gives you 80 gradient levels, of which, you know, and once you get past above, I want to say around 60 or 80, somewhere around there, last time I tested, it gets kind of hard to tell the differences between the colors because there's so many shades that are so close to each other, you know. So we set it at a 20, which is a pretty good safe default because you can kind of still see the differences between all the colors and still understand the chart. Great question. Thanks for bringing that up. I was going to talk a little bit about that, so I'm glad you did. Okay, so I think I'm going to try to get one more question here. Let's see. Is NinjaTrader Continuum level 1 or level 2 data feed, and do you need level 2 data to get volumetric bars? So therefore, do you need kinetic data feed? So yeah, NinjaTrader Continuum connection gives you level 1 and level 2 data. It depends on what you enable for your market data entitlements. So contact your broker to see what you're enabled for. Yeah, so if you have just the level 1 is all you need for everything except for the depth map that I have here on the left, because the depth map uses the level 2 data. So great question. So if I didn't get to your question, I apologize. Any remaining questions, please submit those over to platformsupport@ninjatrader.com. Since we're running up on the hour here, we've been going for about an hour and a half. Really appreciate everybody coming and just kind of hanging out with me in the webinar room, talking order flow, talking the order flow plus tool set in the platform. Terry, are you still with us? And do you have any closing comments? Otherwise, I think we're all good.
All right. Thanks for the webinar, the information, and for spending some time with us this evening.
Awesome, guys. Always a pleasure to be here. I will, again, put up just for kind of the last frame in there, my information there. If you didn't get a question answered and just want to reach out directly to me, it's brett.barrett@ninjatrader.com. Thanks a lot, guys, and have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you.